Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, your one stop shop for all news West Asia, coming to you live. My name is Esteban Carrillo, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, columnist and editor for the Cradle, Charmin Narwani. Today it's just the two of us. Yesterday was just Karim and myself. We are having some, well, in Beirut, actually, there is some internet issues. So, please make sure to hit that like button. Please make sure to subscribe, to share this stream. And also, of course, in the description below, you can find a link that will take you directly to our Patreon page where, for as little as $5 a month, you can become a direct supporter of the Cradle. We really, really need all of your support, from the likes to the subscriptions to the YouTube memberships and also, of course, to the Patreon. Please help support independent journalism. So, over the past 24 hours, a few interesting things have taken place. And just for context, I'm going to say Donald Trump keeps trying to present this reality that he's having talks with Iran, that he's having, that the Iranians are desperate for ceasefire talks. He talked about getting a gift from Iran. He never said what that was. You have multiple Western media reports talking about a 15-point proposal that Donald Trump has presented to Iran via intermediaries. What we're hearing is Turkey, Pakistan, maybe even Egypt, that essentially call for a 1-month ceasefire. And then, we can go over the terms in a bit. But Press TV, just about an hour ago, citing a security political source in Iran, said that Iran has actually presented a counter proposal. And I'm just going to go over the points before I let you go on, Charmin. Iran is saying, halt to all aggression and targeted assassinations, guarantees against a renewed war, full war reparations and compensation, an end to the war across all fronts and resistance groups. This in particular means in Lebanon, and the recognition of Iran's sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz. In other words, the Strait of Hormuz is under our control. Now, what do you make of all of this, Charmin?
I think many of those things are actually the guarantees that the U.S. won't do this again. Okay, so when the Iranians are saying they need a guarantee that they'll never go to war again, what kind of guarantee is this? Would it mean it have to go through Congress? AIPAC owns Congress. That's not a viable solution. And a new president may come into the White House and change a number of things. We know that the Americans are agreement incapable. So I don't think they would be looking for a signed paper. I think by retaining control over the Strait of Hormuz, by ensuring, for instance, a full pullback of Israeli troops out of Lebanon, out of Gaza, those things are so extraordinary that they would, certainly see, they would serve as a hudna. The term Hamas uses often for an extended ceasefire, right, with no cutoff date. And that may be what they're aiming for, because I don't think a signed piece of paper is going to cut it.
I mean, it's honestly, the central question is here. How can they guarantee that this is not going to happen again? Because I've seen even commentators on U.S. news outlets essentially, go out, go and say, they don't trust us. They don't trust us. We already backstabbed them twice during diplomatic talks. Don't forget, Donald Trump is the same person who just completely scrapped the Iran nuclear deal that was already in existence and functioning.
Which, by the way, the Western signatories to the JCPOA in 2015 did not uphold a single one of their promises. So it's lie after lie after lie. It's not just, the negotiations in June and then now. It's a history of breaking promises. And don't forget, there's I think it's called the Algiers Accord, is it? Or Algiers something, that was signed between the Americans and Iranians ages ago. And it was basically to prohibit interference in each other's domestic affairs and into the territorial integrity and sovereignty of each other, right? So, this is a decades-long lie, or indication that the Americans are agreement incapable. Again, I think the devil's in the details. It's not about signing a piece of paper, because that ultimately means nothing. It's as useless as the US dollar will be one day soon. It really will be about, ensuring, for instance, ensuring that there are no US bases in the region. That is something that they won't necessarily have to do with Washington. That is something they could potentially do with regional actors, right? Those agreements are far more likely to stand and hold than anything done with the US. So I think it's the other elements of the deal that will prove whether the US really intends to ensure that this is their last attack on Iran or not.
I think, since you bring up the Gulf nations in particular, because there's been mixed signals, to say the least, coming out of the Gulf in particular. We keep hearing, first of all, these reports from Western media that Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, is one of the main people in Donald Trump's ear, telling him, continue this war. This is a chance to what was the word they use? To kind of like shift the balance of power, right? To change West Asia forever, whatever term they want to use. Like I said, these multiple news outlets, we know that Saudi bases, the Prince Faisal base in particular, has been used multiple times by tankers. We know from the other Gulf states that there's been direct attacks, not just from the bases, but also from the territory of Kuwait or Bahrain. I think it was the New York Times that came out with a report saying that a lot of the missiles that the U.S. has used in this war are relatively short range. I think they were talking about 200 to 300 miles, which means they were launched from the Persian Gulf, from this territory, from the UAE as well. On the other hand, and maybe we can listen to this before hearing your comments about it, let me get his name correctly. The spokesperson for Qatar's foreign ministry, Majed Al-Ansari, well, he had this to say. Let's just put it on screen to hear from him directly.
I think we've said this countless times. Iran has been here for millennia. The people in this region have been here for millennia. Nobody's going anywhere. Total annihilation is not an option. No one people's or country will disappear from existence by the wish or whim of any political actor. We will live next to each other. We will be neighbors for the future of humankind, and we have to find ways of living next to each other. This is a very difficult moment. Our country has been attacked. Our sovereignty has been attacked. We have seen the effects on our economy, on the daily lives of people living here, and we don't take it lightly, and we don't see the attacks on our sovereignty as something that we can live with. Now, that said, obviously, living next to 90 million people in Iran, a proud people that we have shared the Gulf with for, as I said, millennia, will continue, and we will have to find a way past this. This is a very difficult moment, but we will find our way out of it. And I have to say here that our message was always to Iran: the brotherly relationship, the neighborly relationship between our peoples should take paramount over any other political consideration. The fact that they decided to attack our country like this does not show good neighborly relations or the essence of that brotherly relationship, but it is something that we don't find any alternative to in our region.
Interesting comments. Well, what do you think about the current situation today? 25th of March, I think, is the 26th day of the war for the Gulf nations.
First of all, I think even yesterday or the day before, I heard comments like this from Qatari officials. The Qataris are trying to balance something very difficult. Now, all of the 6 GCC countries and the 7 Arab Persian Gulf countries have different considerations. They have different histories. They have different relationships with each other, with their bordering countries, some of which are, always had border disputes that have continued. In Qatar's case, we saw in the last 2 decades, Qatar really, and this is their words, punch above their weight. It became an extremely efficient Persian Gulf nation, from hosting the World Cup to buying luxury brands in the West, buying major sports teams in the West. It sort of like paved the way before the Saudis got involved. It was making a lot of money off its gas, and it decided to spend the money to make it, because it's a tiny country with maybe 300,000 citizens only. Okay, to make Qatar be able to play a larger role on the regional stage and even on the global stage. And one of the things that Qatar did early on is, I think it was 1991, the first Iraq War, right? For the Americans with Kuwait, right? The Qataris, many Saudis were upset about American troops being there, if I recall, because there were women, U.S. female military troops walking around the kingdom, etc. And so the environment had suddenly become hostile to American bases there. And so Qatar offered to host CENTCOM. It offered to host the U.S. military headquarters in all of West Asia and beyond, right, for 22 countries. Now, the reason Qatar did this is because it doesn't have the same issues with its population as the Saudis do. You have like the Saudis live in the big cities, then you have the Wahhabi sheikhs, and then you have the Shia minority in the eastern province, etc. Qatar doesn't have that issue, but Qatar, in order to punch above its weight, Esteban, needed to have that American base so that it could push its boundaries with Saudi Arabia, its much, much bigger, much more hegemonic neighbor, as it's continued to do. And it made things, the Saudis went crazy over this. Okay, yeah. So now in this case, let's look at Qatar's situation. It is one of the Arab countries that has consistently enjoyed good relations with Iran. It has been one of these countries that is open to talking with anyone, right? It's hosted dissidents from many other regional states in its country.
Yes,
it has its own form.
Are you breaking up?
Me?
Okay.
Am I? Okay, it has...
I don't know. It might be my laptop. Go ahead.
Okay. It has a very unique foreign policy from most of the other Persian Gulf countries. And it also started playing early on as part of its punching above our weight policy, and playing in sort of like bringing reconciliation in Lebanon among political parties, in Iraq, even brokering solutions for Sudan. Qatar played an expansive role in the region, West Asia, North Africa. Now, can Qatar even play that role without the protection of a U.S. military base there? It doesn't have to be a U.S. military base. It would be a Russian military base. It would be a Chinese military base. Something that gives it protection from the much bigger players, right? Saudi Arabia and the UAE. But any solution to the Persian Gulf, if led by the Iranians, would necessarily insist on no foreign military bases in the region. So Qatar has to do some major and maybe pulling back from its position. We are seeing something, and I think I made reference to this before the show. So Al-Akhbar, the Egyptian publication, a few days ago, said that Egyptian President Sisi has been in discussion with Gulf officials about ways to secure a ceasefire with Iran. The talks, however, revealed divisions among the Persian Gulf Arab states. Kuwait and the UAE lean toward confrontation with Iran. And we've heard those from both countries, right? We've heard that kind of discourse. And we've seen the HIMARS now, the US weapons being launched from Kuwait very recently. While Oman and Qatar favor de-escalation, which is something we're seeing now. We're seeing this in the top Omani statements and the top Qatari official statements, right? And then goes on to say, and Saudi Arabia backs any decisive steps to end the crisis. And then they mention relations between Egypt and Kuwait seem to be entering a critical phase as Kuwait has pushed back against de-escalation efforts and continues to allow media criticism of Cairo. There's a lot of things happening between these Arab countries. They're not all on one page. Yeah. Even before the Arab Spring, you could see Gulf countries stood differently, took different positions on issues in the region. And Iran was always one of them, you know. Qatar, of course, many Qataris will not forget. And when I was there last and I was talking to major Qatari figures, meaning from the big families, heads of corporations, senior in political circles, and they were saying, we're not going to forget what Iran did. Basically, when the Saudis, Emiratis, and others tried to besiege us, what was it, in 2019, 2017? The only countries that stepped in immediately were Turkey and Iran. Iran sent huge amounts of humanitarian aid, meaning like foodstuffs, etc., to ensure that Qataris didn't go hungry for a day. And so they're not going to forget this. And they understand. I think Doha was a subject of some hits from Iran. And it's a very, very small country, much like Bahrain, you know, like a pinprick practically on the map, and realize, okay, this isn't the way to do this. Also, one of Qatar's considerations is that its North Pars field abuts Iran's South Pars field, gas field, and damage to one will, almost inevitably damage the other, and vice versa. So I think Qatar is stepping out now to show where they stand on this issue. Now, look behind the curtains. Let's imagine this Al-Akhbar article is more or less accurate. Suggests that it says specifically Oman and Qatar on one side, Kuwait and the UAE for like ramping up against Iran, and Saudi Arabia backing any decisive steps to end the crisis. You started your question by talking about the Wall Street Journal piece saying that the Saudis were urging Trump to launch a war in Iran. The Saudis, I believe it was the same day, came out and denied that that was the case. Okay. And this is important because right before this all started, remember the Washington Post did that also fake story about how the Israelis, Netanyahu and Mohammed bin Salman, in their recent visits, meaning late last year to Washington, had lobbied Trump to launch a war against Iran. And the Saudis said that wasn't true. And I tend to believe that because it doesn't benefit. Certainly now it doesn't benefit, right? The Iranians seem to be like attacking Saudi Arabia less, and the UAE more. And now Kuwait, you know, because obviously Americans are launching from there. The Qataris want to stay out of this. They want to, I understand it. And I do think the Saudis will come in. I think the Saudis will come in on the Qatari side of this, because the other consideration is that heading into this war, there was a massive fallout between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi, and Riyadh was going all out to stifle Abu Dhabi's role in the region, its diplomacy in the region, its arms sales, its money laundering in the region. So, you know, today Qatar and Saudi Arabia are on the same side, but we'll see. Sorry, that was kind of long, but it's not a soundbite, as the Western media demands. There are so many layers.
There's so many layers, and it's like a constantly shifting situation. What we're seeing, in particular in the Gulf, after Iran took control of the Strait of Hormuz. And I wanted to bring up something actually, because this is a pretty huge news item that broke today. And you know, as our headline says, friends have a special place. This is the words of the Iranian embassy in Thailand after it was reported that Iran, or well, I guess the IRGC, allowed a Thai tanker to pass through the Strait of Hormuz for exactly $0 and 0 cents, or well, I guess 0 yuans and 0 cents of yuan. And this is an interesting line here. This is according to the Thai foreign minister who spoke with media. And he says, I requested that if Thai ships need to pass through the strait, could they assist in ensuring safe passage? And Iran responded that they will take care of it and asked us to provide the names of the vessels that would be transiting. I mean, we've been talking about the situation in the Strait of Hormuz as just a general paradigm shift for trade, for security, for relations also. And now Iran, you know, they have been saying the strait is not closed. The strait is being controlled by us, which is different. And now they keep putting, you know, like actions to these words. And in particular, you know, in the case of Thailand, being so overt in saying, hey, we didn't even charge you a cent. You guys just called us up. You've been respectful to us. You haven't been, you know, acting to support this war. So yeah, why wouldn't we help you out? And taking this into account also, what Iran is asking, right, in the ceasefire demands, they are saying our control of the Hormuz, it ain't going anywhere. We're staying in control. And I guess it would benefit the Gulf at this point then to understand that they need to accept the shift that has happened.
I mean, I think it's a de facto thing, right? I mean, one could argue that based on, on what basis does Iran have the right to administer and securitize and police the Strait, right? On the other hand, Iran is the biggest littoral state of the Persian Gulf. Plain and simple. It has the longest border of the Persian Gulf of any of the states abutting the Gulf. And I mean, there's a reason it's called Persian Gulf, and that's the reason. Also, there's precedent in the sense that Suez Canal and other man-made routes do charge. In terms of the Iranians cutting the Thai some slack, I feel like this is less explainable in a sort of, an exact way, and more a, is it harbinger of things to come? Because as you saw, and we've talked about before on this podcast, Esteban, like during the Russian-Ukraine war, the Russians gave the Ukrainians a pass to export wheat, providing they went to needier nations. But Ukraine was siphoning all the wheat to Western Europe. And then the Russians said, we see what you're doing. We're going to cut it off now. Now you can't export wheat. And then the Western media made a big to-do about this. Like, it's Russia wants to starve the world. No, Russia wants the part of the world that needs the grains, right, the wheat, to get it. And so we're seeing the same kind of bias. And it is potentially a BRICS bias, right? The BRICS is a global South institution by and large, of global South countries and rising powers. And they want the distribution of all the wealth that has been siphoned off, stolen, pillaged by the West through colonialism and imperialism. And now their global financial systems, their global insurance systems, their global telecommunication systems, every which way. They want to spread it to where it should go. Fair trade, fair practices. Can Thailand afford it? No, so Iran cuts it some slack, and Thailand's been a friendly country, right? So Iran is really practicing what it's preaching. If you don't come to us with animosity, right? I mean, I think if Japan came, Japan can afford it. Japan's going to pay, right? Yeah. European countries are going to pay. Probably even Spain may have to pay because it can't afford it. So to sort of balance out the financials between countries that can manage it and others that can't. I see things. I think it's the instinctive way of the new multipolar and BRICS thinking, in my view.
Indeed. I'm looking up actually something right now because I want to confirm. Some people are in the chat are making reference to this, that Spain has also been granted free passage. I haven't seen confirmation about that.
I've seen talk about that, but I agree with you. I haven't seen confirmation. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I think, the Iranians have been very clear, like you said, if you don't come at us with animosity, we can talk. We are not the Zionists that are going to stab you in the back. And we are not the US, which is, agreement incapable, as you like to cite the Russian diplomats. And, oh my God, I had something in mind, a segue, and I completely lost my train of thought. So, the situation with the war, right? Like as we approach the end of the week, the end of actually the first month, right? On Saturday is going to be 1 month since the start of a war that was supposed to be 4 days. I think it was, right? The expected time frame at the beginning. And Donald Trump, he's lying. He's lying through his teeth. He's lying out of his ass, trying to keep a lead on oil prices. That's what all of this is about, right? Like the ceasefire talks, the gift. My God, they were talking about that tomorrow there was going to be a peace summit in Islamabad, right? Iran hadn't even replied to their proposal, and they were already scheduling a peace summit. Like, it just gave me flashbacks to the Board of Peace in so many different ways, honestly. But we know that by the end of the week, the Marine Expeditionary Units are getting to West Asia, around 5,000 of them. And yesterday, the Pentagon called up about 3,000, what are they called, paratroopers, right, from the 82nd Airborne Unit of the U.S. Army, are also on the way to West Asia. You've talked about this before, Sharmeen, about like the war gaming that the U.S. has done and how they have never actually been able to defeat Iran unless they tip the scales. I remember reading about that they had to essentially make the other side, like, tie their hands behind their back, and then they will defeat Iran. Now they're sending, let's say, 8,000 troops. Let's be generous. Let's say 10,000 troops that are going to get there by the end of the week. What exactly are they going to hope to achieve once they get there, especially when you see what the IRGC is saying, which is, we're waiting for you?
It's hard to say. I mean, the focus has been obviously on Kharg Island, where they, we've reported that 90% of Iran's oil exports leave from this island. I don't know. I mean, first of all, it's a tiny, tiny island, right? I think any U.S. troops there would be sitting ducks. But then I'm not a military person. I mean, they certainly don't have time to build things to protect themselves other than sandbags, right? They don't know the terrain. They don't know that they're, where the maybe tunneling is for protection for Iranian troops. Okay. But what's interesting is that Israel seems to be, or Israelis seem to be discussing a Kharg Island solution for Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz. Like, that seems to be where the discourse in Israel is centering. But of course, by doing that, Israel is basically saying, recognizing, by the way, that it is a very risky military venture. Okay. And essentially, the Israelis are prepared to take this risk with American troop lives. And they are essentially waiting for Donald Trump to be prepared to take the same amount of risk with American troop lives. I mean, we're seeing in the Israeli media a sort of discourse change. There's a sense that Iran has strategically and tactically overtaken some things that were unexpected, and seem to have done it seamlessly. Seamlessly meaning decapitation of major leaders, right, including the biggest of them all, the supreme leader, hitting energy targets, hitting nuclear sites, hitting water plants, hitting a whole host of things, which they then had to pull back from because Iran had a lever, right? Iran had a lever. We will hit U.S. allies in the Gulf in the same places, right? Or we will hit Israel. So they could only do so much, right? So I think there's a sort of a gloominess that has sunk upon the Israeli sort of strategic community, and they're grasping at straws now. And one of those straws that is repeated is landing U.S. troops on Kharg Island, and I think other maybe another small island in the Persian Gulf. Of course, these are things discussed in public, so who knows if they mean them at all. But these are things that are in Hebrew, so maybe they are more open when discussing things in Hebrew. They're also, I don't know if this is real or fake information. The Hebrew press is also hinting at talks that have happened between Jared Kushner and Witkoff with Araqchi. Okay, which the Iranians have consistently denied. But, there's so many stories being spun in Western media and Israeli media now, one really doesn't know. But the Iranians were pretty, straightforward about it, that they would not be having direct talks with the U.S. or indirect talks. And they've not made that decision yet. Sorry, let me correct that. And that I think we got some information. I don't know. Do you know if this is verified or not, that the Iranians said they would not be talking with either Kushner or Witkoff?
I'm pretty certain of that. I mean, we know who they represent, and they have been in charge of the talks the 2 times that they were that the Iranians were betrayed. And I mean, Western media keeps saying that Iran is actually looking at JD Vance that they want J.D. Vance to be part of the
Yeah,
talks.
but did an Iranian official actually say that? That's what I can't.
No.
We're reading so much. It's really hard to. Okay, but the other thing is that the Israelis are very concerned about, and we're hearing more and more Israeli officials, past and present, hint at this, which is that Israel and the United States were in a better place with Iran before the war started. Essentially conceding that their war has gone dramatically in the wrong direction for them. That in fact, and they don't know. They concede that the supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei, the new one, is likely to be alive. They don't know where he is or the extent of injuries, if any. And they don't know if Mujtaba Khamenei is giving direction to the IRGC, but they acknowledge that the IRGC, the military strategists of the country, have become central to everything in Iran. Okay, and that there are infinite numbers of them, and they're all super highly educated. Okay, and they're super strategists. These guys have been nothing but military strategy, asymmetrical stuff for the last 40 years. So it seems like whatever they do, I mean, the Israelis and Americans, they actually consolidate resistance in Iran, and the response gets harder and harder. And they concede that taking out Larijani was the dumbest thing ever. Who are we going to talk to now?
Boy, yeah.
But I would argue that possibly in Israel, there's a split too, just like in the United States. I mean, there's some Israelis who would rather die than have the U.S. strike a deal with Iran. And that there are others who are more concerned about Israel getting hit and would welcome a deal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's
hard to say, but right now the Israeli media is definitely something to read. It brings a lot of nuance that we don't see in English. Okay, though of course much of it may not be true, and I highly recommend subscribing to Alistair Crook's Conflicts Forum on Substack because he provides very interesting detail and brings in top editorials that bring nuance, etc. Several times a week on the Hebrew Press. But go ahead.
I was going to say, Bill, before you do that, just subscribe to our Patreon, please. Make sure to do that as well. You were talking about the Israeli media. I was checking it right now, and you reminded me of something. Among the many reports, let me just say this very quickly. Among the many reports we saw about the ceasefire talks, there was one, and I wish I had it, but I don't, in which they said, for now, it has been decided that we're not going to kill Iraqi, and we're not going to kill, I can't remember, the head of the parliament, the guy who's always tweeting, the head of the Iranian parliament. I mean, how do you even approach that, from that perspective? We're not going to kill you now. We're going to let you live for a few more days, see if we can talk to you, and then we'll probably kill you. Like they have done.
No. I mean, the way they talk about it is though they're like, then I'm going to eat that yogurt. There's just no concept of how ridiculous they sound.
Psychotic.
Yeah. There was one Hebrew language account I read about this alleged phone call between, I can't remember if it was Araqchi himself or someone speaking on behalf of Araqchi in Iran, right? Speaking directly. So from a phone in Iran, phone line, not like encrypted anything, phone line in Iran to Witkoff's actual mobile. And Jared Kushner was standing there with him. All right. So maybe they want Araqchi to be around. Well, maybe the Americans are protecting him or some of the Gulf Arabs in the sense that they saw what the Israelis did with Larijani. And they said, if you take out our ability to negotiate, okay, we're going to drop you. We don't know what's happening behind the scene, but very publicly, Trump has kind of, not embraced Araqchi and then Ghalibaf, right? But kind of offered public protection for them. So, I mean, we'll see, but I don't think they know. Like, I go to Iran, I visit Iran maybe once a year, and sometimes more, sometimes less. And I just everyone I meet for my meetings with work is super smart, and they're just kinds of people who meet with journalists. I'm not not usually meeting with officials, like ministers. I'm meeting with regular people who can talk to me about, nuance and stuff. And I don't know what they think. Like it's almost like the Israelis have a database of names of people they've identified over the years who are too smart for their own good and blah blah blah, right?
Exactly.
And then the Americans have an even shorter amount of names. Certainly this U.S. president, I don't think he can produce or pronounce Araqchi and Ghalibaf's names. We should ask him on camera.
I don't think he even tries. On the one side, this picture, I've been laughing about it for the past day. This was published yesterday by the Telegraph. These are the two who Donald Trump sent to get him a nuclear deal, right? In reality, what did they do? They acted like what they are, like mafiosos, right? Like mafia members, and just
real estate mafia guys.
Exactly. I mean, Witkoff here, on his way to Epstein Island, I guess. But in any case, actually, before we continue, I want to thank everyone that we've had a couple of super chats and a couple of people gifted memberships also. Thank you very much. Honestly, thank you so much for your support. And if you haven't yet, please make sure.
Cheesy 8, let's call him out. He sent out a number of gift memberships and then subscribed himself.
Yes, it was the same.
He sent 5 Cradle gift memberships. You rock.
Thank you so very much. Catherine Leavitt, the spokeswoman of the White House, just gave a little. She spoke to the press, and she says that the initial timeline for this. No, I'm sorry, never mind. The U.S. is ahead of the expected 4 to 6 week timeline for Iran war. And they're very, very close to meeting the objectives, Charmaine. How can we distrust these people? While you were talking earlier, I was putting up this video of what the IRGC says is an F-18 that was hit by Iranian air defenses. CENTCOM has come out and said, nope, it's fake news. But then again, it's CENTCOM. So Central Command, for those of you who don't know, the U.S. Central Command. We are also seeing, earlier today we saw, and let me put this because this is very important, what happened earlier today in Israel. It was an attack on a petrochemical plant that is linked to the production of white phosphorus, which is something, viewers are familiar with this, right? This chemical that Israel uses liberally on Lebanon, on Gaza, on Iran, and this is the footage of the attack. A direct hit, and this is in the Mishor Rotem industrial area directly north of the Dimona nuclear reactor in the occupied Negev desert in Israel. And, Resistance News Network did a bit of a deep dive, and they identified this plant, as I said, that is actually exporting the material to the U.S. that they then use to create the white phosphorus munitions, which are illegal, but yet nevertheless Israel uses all of the time. I think they're still using it right now in the south of Lebanon. The White House can say we are close to the end of this war. The Israelis can say we have defeated the Iranians and we're going to continue to our own war against Lebanon. But they're really not dictating the terms of any of these, are they? And actually now, this is the second time in a week that Iran hits a direct strike just a few kilometers away from the Dimona nuclear reactor.
Yeah, again, the Israelis, I've seen quotes from them saying Iran can go at this with its current pace of strikes much longer. I think, they concede that the trickery that worked for Trump and Netanyahu before, saying that the mission was complete and everything was destroyed, it's not something that will work again, right? They can't use that again. People aren't believing them now. That both sides, Netanyahu and the Americans, have already changed the goals of the war. And that the Israeli prime minister is already preparing for the possibility. They're preparing. They're exactly what you're saying. Like there are some de facto things that almost nothing seems can change, right? And so the understanding is there. They also know that the more this drags on, because Iran's calculus is very different, like a war of attrition just allows for the energy shocks to hit the world, and particularly the Western world. Don't forget, at the same time as the Americans sort of cut out Russian gas for Europe, now cutting off Iranian gas for Europe, and then holding, like literally holding a knife to the neck of the entire European Union, saying you either agree to my deal, all right, my trade deal on Thursday, and you buy US gas, or else we'll just cut you out of it. It's insane.
Mhm.
So, I mean, all Iran has to do is keep the status quo, and a lot of other important considerations for its adversaries will start to collapse, and worsen every week. So the clock is ticking more for the American-Israeli side. The Israelis, of course, are also, they may be ready to go for forever until they're, they've got huts and clubs in their hands still, right? But they're very aware that Trump does not have the stomach for this. He doesn't like to be losing. So I think from week to week, we're going to see some changes. By the way, as bleak as the situation looks strategically for the Americans and Israelis, I don't at all put it past them to pull an ace out of their sleeve in something, but it won't be a monumental, game-changing one. It will be a psychological one that makes people wonder again, oh, wait a second, are we on the back foot? That kind of thing. They will continue to do that because, as we've noted before on this podcast, neither the Israelis nor the Americans ever know how to stop warring.
Because that's not what they are there to do, right? They're there to start wars, not so much to end them, not even win them, right? Like, when's the last time they won a war? We have a question. Actually, I want to thank also Sia Partovi. They made a super chat. Thank you so much. And we have a question in a super chat by F. Chow. Thank you very much. And he asked, is it true the Iraqi government has allowed the militias to retaliate as needed? Yes and no. And we talked about this actually yesterday because it came out while we were doing the podcast. In the same statement, they say that any attacks launched without the approval of the government essentially should cease, right, and are illegal. But at the same time, they give the PMU or the Hashd al-Shaabi, they recognize them, of course, as they often do as part of the armed forces, and say, if you need to retaliate to attacks, then you have to do it, within your capacities as well. So it really is kind of like an order to the militias that haven't opened a front against the U.S. and Israel, and actually condemning those that have, opened this front.
Well, let's talk about the fact that the Iraqi government essentially gave the green light for 250,000 Iraqi troops to fight the U.S. and Israel.
Yeah.
Was it yesterday or was it the day before? I can't remember. I don't even know if we've discussed it on this podcast.
Can you repeat it? Actually, I didn't really understand what you said.
So let me see if I can pull up actually some data, because we were discussing it.
In the meantime, let me thank Buscalo for their donation. They're asking if I have an outlet in Spanish. I do not, but in the mornings I do a podcast in Spanish that you can find it in my social media. So go follow me. I think my handle is here, right? Yeah, there it is. That's my handle. You can find me there. Thank you so much. I don't know. Let me know if you.
Yeah. So basically, after saying that they would ceasefire the Americans, right, they then targeted a very important commander and killed him. So another lie, another feint. Okay. And it was so outrageous that Iraq, and we have a video here, but I don't, this one doesn't have English subtitles. Iraq has basically greenlit its troops to fight the attacks, to defend against the U.S. and Israeli attacks, targeting Iraq's official Popular Mobilization Forces, the PMF, which are integrated. Most of them are integrated into the Iraqi military, right? You have some pro-Iran elements that sort of do their own thing. But in this case, we're talking, from what I recall, 250,000 paramilitary forces under the PMF to fully respond and retaliate against strikes by the United States. I don't know that we know what that means yet, but we have one of our writers working on a feature on this. And I was thinking of getting the amazing Hossein Askari back on. For those of you who watched that interview, if you haven't, go back and watch it. So the part 2 will be like, to explain what's happening in Iraq now. Of course, we had that very unclear fatwa by Ayatollah Sistani a week or 2 ago in Iraq that that needed a lot of interpretation. Nobody knew. I mean, it wasn't a decisive one like the one he gave in the fight against ISIS. So I mean, things are brewing in Iraq, and I tell you something, Esteban. Like, I feel that a lot of this is happening because perceptions matter. And the perception is like people are just astounded at how badly the Americans are doing and how badly they're lying. And nobody believes anything. I mean, people are talking about how Americans are talking about how I go to the Iranian IRGC statements for facts now and bypass our own officials because I don't, otherwise I'll never know what's happening. So I think this perception that the Americans are weaker than a spider's web, as Hassan Nasrallah might say today if he were here, certainly emboldens a lot of players in this region.
I'm going to pick your brain here a bit because I think that's a very interesting what you just said. And do you think the Iranians now, seeing exactly how poorly the U.S. is doing, that they regret not picking this fight earlier? Because, I mean, there were chances. There were several chances. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Well, in a way, Iran wouldn't be here with so much global public support and even sort of unwillingness of European states to join in on the U.S. side, which they've never. There's always been a few, right, who've joined these American crusades around the world. If Gaza hadn't happened, okay, if the Ukraine war hadn't happened, if the decapitations hadn't happened, if the dropping the JCPOA first, okay, then doing this lie negotiations and then hitting Iran in June of 2025 and then again in February of 2026 hadn't happened, would Iran have the moral authority? And moral authority is conveyed by people. You can't buy that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The moral authority it has today, so much so that the president of Germany stands up and says, this was an illegal war that the US and Israel launched against Iran. And not one European country, including the, what did y'all say, the Quislings, the British Quislings, right? Not one of them would stand with the Americans on this. Had Iran done it earlier, had Iran done it on October 8th, 2023, would these conditions be the same? I mean, I think the Iranians, as much as we've sometimes disparaged their strategic patience, I disagree with those who think that it was all for naught. I think the Iranians have shown now that they have a very good ability to gauge moods and outcomes, from their neighbors, from countries further afield, from Asians who need, Asian countries who need the oil and gas, and they move with diplomacy first. So I'm sure in the lead up to this, they have made great efforts, like a charm offensive to make great efforts to, improve relations where they can, because they knew what would potentially come one day. And then don't forget the law of the jungle that the US and Israel have now applied to the world, right? The Epstein case, all these things add up to making this a perfect environment for Iran to let loose in. But the law of the jungle thing gave, and the way they killed the supreme leader, right? and talked about it like it was just, a sandwich they were buying. I mean, just like a regular conversation about anything, right? Between two people randomly in the world. The way they've done this has mobilized, and this is always important, mobilize your public, your populations to wage a war. And that is one thing I've repeatedly said here, Esteban, that Trump never bothered to do that with the American public. It is the first war I've seen where they haven't fully propagandized the American public and before a war. And that is coming to haunt them now. But Iran did the opposite. It took enough hits that Iranians were incensed, no matter your political orientation in Iran. So they have domestic buy-in and moral support, and now they have international buy-in and moral support. And it just took a few very constructive tactical wins to establish that.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that we're very close in time to Iran essentially just being the most popular nation on earth, just by the way that they are hitting back at the bully in the face. Because, as you said, Charmaine, and I completely agree with you, Donald Trump, what he did was lay the groundwork for Iran to have the moral upper hand, because, we have to talk about ICE. We have to talk about Venezuela, the kidnapping of Maduro. We have to talk about the tariffs. We have to talk about what he's doing in Cuba right now, which is inhumane to say the least. I mean, the other night, an entire everyone in a hospital in Havana who was on a respirator died because there was no power. And, at the same time, the U.S. Embassy is asking the Cuban government to allow shipments of diesel for the U.S. Embassy while not allowing shipments of fuel for hospitals. And let me just tell you a short story of something that happened this week in my country. In Ecuador, there was discovered that the U.S. is there, right? Like, they're boots on the ground, they're dropping bombs near the border. And a few weeks ago, they released this video saying that they hit a drug lab in the border with Colombia. And then the president of Colombia came out and said, that wasn't a drug lab, you killed a bunch of people. And then yesterday, the New York Times, of all outlets, comes out with an in-depth report. They spoke to the people. The Ecuadorian government, with the help of the U.S. Army, based on intelligence of the U.S. Army, they bombed a milk farm. They bombed a milk farm on the Colombian border just because they could. And you know what they're calling this operation? They're calling it total extermination. That's the name that they have given. They have been killing people in the Caribbean Sea. Where am I going with this? Gaza itself was evidence enough of the depravity behind the U.S. empire. But now you have these same images happening in places that you never thought they were going to happen before, and they're happening as we speak, and the people are watching. And, people might be propagandized, people might be distracted by so many things, but in general, people are not stupid. Then they can add, 1 + 1. And in this case, the math adds up, right? Who is the evil one? Who is the one doing the wrong? Who is the one bombing girls' schools? Who is the one bombing farms? It's the United States. And it's, in this case particular, it's Donald Trump. And, you cannot get away from that. You are not going to wash away that stench.
Very, very well said. Stench indeed. We have seen ourselves the kinds of comments we get on our interview shows and on the podcast from Americans saying, I'm so ashamed of my country. You see it all over social media, Americans saying, I'm so ashamed of my country. Like, I want Iran to win. I think Iran has now, as you said, is kind of becoming, is what happened? How do myths and legends, how are they born? Okay. They're born from, sometimes unique acts of bravery that were unexpected. And then people build them up. Do you see these memes that are going around of like the valiant Iranians, the David Goliath? I mean, Iran is now the one protecting not just its country, but the world. I mean, the fact that Americans use this term like Iran, wipe out the Epstein class for us, shows that fundamentally, and this is why I've always said, people are a lot smarter, populations are a lot smarter than governments give them credit for. Okay, even uneducated or illiterate ones, people can sense the feeling on the street if people are tightening their purse strings, if people are, anxious about insecurity. These things resonate. And I think the people of the world, it's going to rally people behind them. I actually think, I don't know if anyone from the Cradle is listening right now, but we should do some t-shirts because our political t-shirts did really well. Not political, but slightly political t-shirts over Christmas did really well, right? Rather than our season's greetings ones. And I'm thinking, there's a need to convey how people are feeling about Iran. Again, I'm not fangirling. I'm just saying, like, everybody is talking about Iran, like, woo, way to go. And the global South entirely, how did the global South come behind Russia in the Ukraine war, right? Do you remember that time 4 years ago? The Americans were so frustrated they couldn't get many global South countries to impose sanctions on the Russians.
They launched a coup in Pakistan over that. Don't forget that one.
Yeah, Imran Khan went to Moscow. How dare you? So I'm just saying, like, people are very excited. We're seeing rallies in unlikely countries all the time, and maybe Sunni majority states in our part of the world for Iran. We're seeing them in European capitals. So yeah, it's not good for the. I mean, what do we always say? Israel stands on two legs. One is its myths, its fairy tales. Okay, it's tales of victimhood, right? That's gone. Everyone knows it's a genocidal state and has no morals. And the second leg is Jews moving there, right? And in fact, nothing could be further from the truth. Israelis will be leaving, and for good, because once they take a thrashing like this, never before in their history, the people who went there for tech, for beaches, for, like to be able to be with fellow Jews and speak Hebrew, how they raise them in schools in America, like, oh, the best thing you can do is go to the motherland, that kind, the umbilical cord will be cut. And we're going to see, Israel's just not going to be what it was on February 27th. I would argue it hasn't been since October 7th, yes, 2023, but February 27th, 2026 was the last time Israel looked and felt the way it did.
Exactly. And I think this is actually where we are. It's not really, about being a fan or not. It's just the perception, as you were saying. I want to just give a brief update of the situation in Lebanon. As many of you have noticed, Karim is not with us right now. There's actually very, very severe internet issues in Lebanon. I wonder who's behind that. In Beirut, in particular, the bombings have continued. Actually, I wanted to put this up on screen. This is from Al-Manar correspondent in South Lebanon, Ali Sohaib, who says the battlefield in the town of Taibe and its surroundings are ablaze with guided missiles, rocket barrages, and artillery shells targeting Israeli tanks and enemy forces. A state of hysteria is reported among the troops, with shells and gunfire being fired in all directions, while hostile warplanes are flying heavily overhead and deploying heat flares. As I said, the situation in Beirut is also, as has been over the past few weeks. We keep in touch with our team. Of course, they keep telling us we hear the planes constantly, the drones constantly. I just wanted to give that update because, since Karim is not here, we really, neither you or me are currently in Lebanon, so we cannot give you the information from the ground. But, the war is continuing, unfortunately.
We have an article coming up, hopefully early next week, on Israeli body bags. If a land invasion happens, what the various scenarios are. So watch out for that. I think Mohammed has also given us some really good insights there. And we will be interviewing, it was delayed, sorry guys, Ali Jazini, military journalist from Al Mayadeen. We had some hiccups, and that will come to you as soon as we can get it to you. So we will be doing plenty more Lebanon stuff, and I hope some Iraq stuff, because the ground is shifting in Iraq that has been basically puppeteered by Washington since 2003 and still sends all its petrodollars to one account in the United States. That may be changing too. Every single day shifts in this region. Of course, Esteban hosting the show, helming it every day for us at the Cradle. We are striving to bring you the most updated news. Sometimes we miss something, but thankfully you guys mention it in the comments. and remind us of something we may have missed for the day that's really hot issue. But there's so many hot issues going on right now. Like it's, how do you even decide what to focus on?
It's impossible. We unfortunately, and that's actually, I will say to our social media team, you guys are doing an amazing work, because you hit almost everything that comes out. In my section, in the news section, it's a bit more difficult given the amount of more work that goes into it. So, but it is, it's just like overwhelming the amount. And I just wanted to show this very quickly, since I mentioned Lebanon, because this happened earlier today in Israeli TV. This is the mayor of Margaliot in the Galilee, who apparently broke down on live TV because essentially saying, to the government, you're not doing anything to protect us. These settlements are gone, essentially. We can say goodbye to them. So when they talk about the hysteria, right, as Ali Chauvet says, in the north of, in the south of Lebanon, well, this extends towards the north of the occupied territories, this hysteria over the fact that, well, there's not much that can be done to defeat Hezbollah.
Well, they're not even running sirens in many of these places now, because they don't want to use their interception. They want to save it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's the thing. That, by the way, this was noticed, I think, even in 2024 by us, that they in the Hebrew press, some northern Zionist colonies, whatever, were noting that they're not even. Why didn't they hear sirens when rockets were coming in? And the Israeli government was, and military were saying, "Oh, we're going to look into this." And I was like, because you're not important enough. You're not in Gush Dan. There's not enough of you there, and they want to save their interceptors. So they'll increasingly say, "Oh God, we're not getting, the stuff on our radar, etc." It was easier at the time for these people to move out of the range of rockets than to actually waste an interceptor on them. And this is, by the way, the same thing that the Gulf Arabs are seeing about the Americans. Do we want to waste our interceptors on you, or we want to save it for our, our biggest, what is it? Our stationary aircraft carrier in West Asia, the state of Israel. And also, this is something I read quite a while ago. Karim kept saying, no, it's not true. But Mohan Marandi said it the other day too. This has been the case since the Iranians took out some of the U.S.'s biggest radars throughout the region, right? So in Israel, in Jordan, in various Persian Gulf states, and then drained them out of a substantial amount of interceptors. But at that point, I had read in the Hebrew press that we're not getting 10 minutes warning. The sirens aren't going off 10 minutes before a strike. Sometimes they're going off seconds before. Yeah. And it's because the radar, right? They don't have the same radar to detect in the same way, which is actually why we're not seeing Netanyahu. Okay, that is my personal conviction, because Netanyahu has evacuation teams set up for people like him and cabinet members, right? The radar locks onto an incoming, and then these people are moved out swiftly. They're out of the place. There's a cigarette still on the ashtray burning, right? Like in the movies. But in this case, he can't be seen because he doesn't have that 10 minutes anymore. He has mere seconds potentially. So that's my theory on why Netanyahu's gone underground as of late.
And I saw earlier today that apparently they are. I forgot what I saw, but it has something to do with CCTV cameras. How they're trying to. That Iranian hacker groups are apparently trying to hack the CCTV cameras in order to spot where the authorities are. Thank you so much to Florizontal. What a great name for your super chat. Can American troops really make it to Iran without getting all killed? I mean, we're about to find out. I'm pretty certain of that when we are about to find out. But in any case, I think we can wrap it up for today. We try to cover the main topics as we are capable. Hopefully tomorrow it'll be the three of us back. But if not, of course, we'll hold the fort here in whatever way possible. I want to thank everyone who joined us today. I want to thank. I don't have the Patreon video. I think Karim actually asked me about this before the start of the show, but I don't see it. So in any case, special thanks to our Patreons. Of course, today you will not see your names on screen because unfortunately I don't really see the video here. But to anyone else who hasn't become a patron yet, please consider it. You can find the link in the description below. For as little as $5 a month, it will really mean the world to us. As we have said, most of our team currently is in a war zone. And nevertheless, we are here to bring you the news, not just through our podcast. This is just one of the media that we use here at The Cradle. You can find us on X, you can find us on Telegram, you can find us on Instagram as TC Media News. Of course, our website, thecradle.co. And we are gonna, we'll keep it running as long as we're capable, but we do need your support. So please consider it. And of course, thank you to you, Charmaine, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Over 4 years in, and despite all the censorship, website attacks, and war across West Asia, The Cradle hit 1 million monthly readers in 2025. And we couldn't be more grateful. Up until this moment, you've had access to all our work for free. Over 30,000 articles, including investigations, analysis, interviews, news content, videos, podcasts, and more. All of this without paywalls, without harassing you and hunting you down for donations. But now it's do or die. December 31st, 2026 is the deadline for The Cradle to become completely reader funded, because that's the model all media should have. When readers pay for your content, it means media outlets live or die based on whether they're producing reliable, intellectually stimulating information analyses that simply isn't available elsewhere.
يعني يلا